Back in 2013, a small indie game arrived on the Xbox 360. The zombie survival genre was nothing new, but this was a bit different. It was State of Decay, an unexpected hit that would see future releases on the Xbox One and Windows PCs. State of Decay was a weird one. Other games had done zombie survival, other games had done permadeath, other games had done resource gathering as well, but no game had, at the time, combined them successfully into such a coherent package. The original State of Decay was not a flashy AAA title. You could easily be forgiven for overlooking it in favour of titles like Left 4 Dead 2, Dying Light, or even zombie modes in popular non-zombie titles like Call of Duty. The game was a buggy mess, a glitchy, sometimes cringe-worthy experience with so-so visuals and laughable AI that had no right to be looked upon so favourably by so many. But there was something there in the gameplay that drew people in and kept them playing. When Jeff Strain, founder of Undead Labs, said that the first State of Decay was just the start of our long-term ambitions, the next logical step, 5 years on, is State of Decay 2. It's only Undead Labs' second release ever. So what do we got here? State of Decay 2 is an open-world, third-person action game with a focus on melee weapons. There's plenty of firearms in the game, but the thing with guns is that they tend to be quite boomy. And this is bad news if you're trying not to attract too many undead horrors to your general vicinity. The main draw is that you are not playing as a particular character. You build a gaggle of survivors who hang out in your base, and you're free to switch between them, taking control of whichever one you like. The thing is, you will be switching a lot. Injuries sustained while out and about will lower a character's maximum health pool. Fatigue from using the same character for too long will lower the stamina pool, and so eventually you'll be forced to change to another one. However, permadeath is a constant threat. If you lose all your health while controlling a particular character, that character will die for good. You have the option of picking another character from your base, and you can even return to the site of the kicked bucket to retrieve that deceased character's possessions. Characters can and will die, but while you're not getting them all killed, they will level up in a few abilities that make them stronger, better with weapons, better at healing. This means that losing a particularly skilled character hits quite hard, and this is possibly where some of the emotional attachment to the game's cast lies. While your fellow survivors are hanging about not doing much in the base, they will consume resources like food, water, medicine, generic materials to keep things up and running, and a number of other things. Your job as a player is to make sure that none of these resources run out. By scavenging what you can from an absolutely huge map full of houses, gas stations, convenience stores, factories, and a few others. Resources generally thematically match the building from which they're gathered, so medicines will be found in hospitals or veterinary surgeries, and fuel can be found at gas stations, obviously. While the game gives you a good chance to get used to the somewhat complex mechanics and gameplay loops involved, you will have an easy time with Aziz smashing off many a squishy head with mirth and glee. Things will soon ramp up though, and the draw of the gameplay is just how tense it can get. You might need both medicine and food, for example. If you get medicine, it might stop one survivor from dying on you, but if you don't get that food, low morale and desperation might cause some other survivors to abandon you and make their own way. The game's full of tricky decisions like this, and not at all full of scripted sequences or story missions, although there are a few. It's mostly about your own prioritization necessarily coming back to haunt you, along with a dozen or so ghosts of survivors you got killed in nasty ways. Here's my main gripe with State of Decay 2. What's changed? There's a new play area. That's really the only significant difference in gameplay. Yes, the older CryEngine 3 visuals have been swapped out for the more modern Unreal Engine 4, but really, that goes without saying, doesn't it? Remember, this is a game that was 5 years in the making. That's about the same amount of time The Witcher 3 was in development, and about double the time needed for each Call of Duty release if you consider that there's one release a year and there's 3 dev studios in rotation. Don't get me wrong, this is great for anyone who has yet to experience the stress-fueled into the midnight hours play sessions associated with State of Decay, but for everyone who played the first game, we're thinking, isn't this just more of the exact same? State of Decay 2 is a Play Anywhere title, which means that purchasing it on either the Windows 10 store or the Xbox One gives you the ability to play it on both platforms. And that's something I most certainly did. but neither version should have seen the light of day and reached players' hands in this state. On the Xbox One, the interface will just randomly decide to flicker to the point where it should genuinely come with an epilepsy warning. Other times it just glitches out, showing only some letters from some words, and other times still it will vanish completely, leaving you without a health bar, minimap, crosshair. Sometimes textures will just fail to load, such as one instance I had where all of the ground textures vanished except for the roads, leaving my character floating in mid-air and unable to see if I was about to make a step forward or a step off a giant cliff. Infuriatingly, sometimes the UI will get stuck after you press a button, as though you'd held that button down, creating a flickering in-out of menus and an ear-destroying cacophony of menu noises. On Windows 10, the situation is different, but hardly better. I was playing with an Xbox 360 wireless controller, and using the mouse and keyboard for aiming guns, because naturally it's far more accurate. If I let the Xbox controller power off, which is automatic after a few minutes of not being used, it would not be recognised by the game when powered back on. It required a game restart to get it connected again. There's also a huge performance drain on a Windows 10 PC, most noticeable when driving. I was actually unable to get a frame rate on this one. It's not a Steam release, so the Steam overlay can't provide a frame rate. Nvidia's GeForce Experience doesn't work with the game at the time of recording, so no frame rate there either. Windows 10's game bar didn't even work, which is a bit perplexing since it's a Windows Store game. I was playing on a Core i9-7900 with 32 gigs of RAM and a GeForce 1080 Ti, and should have been perfectly good performance. The GPU wasn't maxed out with VSync enabled, but it certainly felt like it was slipping to 30 frames per second rather than 60 at a 4K resolution. I mean, luckily none of these problems exist on the Xbox One, but the graphics are noticeably worse. On the Xbox One S that I was using, versus maximum settings on the PC, draw distance and pop in where distant objects suddenly appear as if from nowhere was awful, and gone with a lens flare and other post-processing effects. The game had a sort of muddy sheen of washed out textures and low detail, which is disappointing to say the least. One of the neat features of the game is the ability to recruit a follower to accompany you. And you select someone from the base, and that person rides shotgun with you in any vehicle you drive and joins the fray when it's time to bash in some zombie skulls. At least that's the theory. Frustratingly often, your trusty companion will simply disappear, save for the little indicator on the minimap. It indicates that your companion's still following you, but they're just nowhere to be found. This isn't too bad in the early game, where soloing's perfectly feasible, but later on, when the zombie poop hits the fan, it's exponentially more difficult unless you have an AI companion helping you out. More infuriating still, you can't simply get another follower from the base. First, you have to dismiss your current follower, and that's impossible when that follower has completely vanished. You're stuck. This can sometimes resolve itself by restarting the game, or even switching between the Xbox and Windows versions. Is it cloud save, so you only have one save game across both platforms? But this doesn't always work. As if Undead Labs knew their game was technically flawed in game-breaking ways, there's a handy menu option for stuck. Calling up this option will reset your character as if you get stuck inside a piece of terrain or something like that. It's almost as though Undead Labs knew this could happen, and instead of, actually fixing the problem, just gave players a workaround to get up and running again when the game breaks. One of the more frustrating occurrences is that vehicles tend to get stuck very easily on immovable terrain. So you can easily wedge one on a crash barrier or log and just be unable to move. Vehicles are permanent, and they are limited, meaning that if you abandon it, it will simply remain there forever, and the stuck option only resets your character, not any vehicles. So that really is the end of the vehicle. In a way that could only be described as hilarious unless you're the one suffering it, it's possible and quite likely that your companion will exit the vehicle through the floor, instead of the convenient and the physics-obeying option of using the nearest door. I had a companion who was stuck up to his head in the asphalt beneath the vehicle. When I moved the vehicle out of the way, he stubbornly refused to yield to the natural law of the universe and the strong nuclear force, and instead insisted on constantly rolling again and again. It was impossible to interact with him in this state, so I couldn't dismiss him as a follower, so that was that. Another game restart. I'm going to put this as brutally honestly as possible. The user interface is awful and extremely cumbersome. For example, you need to select ammunition that matches the firearm you selected. 9mm, .357, .22, so on. However, there's just random icons that all look like piles of bullets in the base inventory. They're not in any particular order, and that means that if you have to shuffle through each one, you have to wait for the tooltip to appear until you can find the right one. The simple solution to that is add the name of the ammunition to the icon, but no. Inventory management's a huge pain. You can load the trunk of any car with items to provide more storage space. However, your character can only carry one bag of supplies, along with a set number of regular items. Since scavenging mostly involves gathering supplies for your base, this is problematic. Suppose your vehicle's full, and your character inventory is full, and you're carrying a bag of supplies. You notice there's a low-value item in your vehicle which you could just discard, and load the supplies in the vehicle instead. The problem is you can't discard things from a vehicle inventory. Your character needs to pick up the item first, so your character needs to drop an item from their personal inventory, which can't be done while looking at the vehicle inventory, then take an item from the vehicle, drop it on the ground, and pick up the previously dropped item. There's no need for this type of inventory Tetris in a modern game. Stacking of items is also a huge problem. Certain inventory items like ammunition and bandages can be carried in stacks, each taking up one precious slot. If you want to take one bandage, one bottle of pills, one C4, one Molotov, and one strip of firecrackers, well, that's 5 inventory slots. You can take a whole pile of Molotovs or bandages in one slot, which just makes no sense. Worse still, you can carry around 10 portable generators in your pockets and your rucksack all at the same time. Portable generators, because that makes sense. A better system here is just to have a variable size in the inventory with larger items taking up more space. Although the game gives you a choice of starting location, in the form of 3 different maps, the starter house is always the same layout. However, it's almost like someone in the Undead Labs design studio said, "Hey, let's make the most douchebag base layout you possibly can, because I enjoy the schadenfreude of watching our player base suffer." Starter house is on 2 stories, and the supply cache is nowhere near the parking. So if you need to unload a vehicle, it's many trips back and forth. Upstairs, downstairs. Worse still, remember that you can't use the menus to select a companion. You have to walk up to the character in the game world. But there's no indicator to show you which character is currently where in your base, so you're running willy-nilly through all the many tiny rooms in the house as though zombie ants have got into your clothes, trying to find a companion who isn't dangerously low on health. Why or why can't we just choose a companion from the menus if we're already in the base? I understood that the starter base was supposed to be a sort of, it'll do for now until we find a better one type of deal. But boy, are the upgrades limited. Each base comes with a number of areas where you can build facilities, but the starter one only comes with 3, and even the larger ones are pretty limited. It's a disappointing upgrade tree for your facilities as well. In general, they can have level 1, 2, or 3, each providing more of whatever the facility provides. An infirmary will be able to heal more people once at higher levels, while a barracks can provide more beds. There's really not a lot more to it than that. It's essentially the exact same system they had in the first State of Decay. There's a complete lack of progress for 5 years of development. There's no other customization options, like spending materials on changing the look and feel of the base, or rearranging your parking to be closer to the supply cache so you're not constantly making trips back and forth. Now, as the difficulty ramps up, one thing becomes abundantly clear. Individual skill at melee combat has no effect on survival ability in this game. In melee combat, a single character can take on 3, possibly 4 zombies at once, no more. There are some special moves, but these don't have any strategic effect like getting behind zombies for a quick kill, so it's mostly just a button mash session until your stamina bar is depleted and then you're screwed. The only thing likely to make a difference is not player skill, it's gear. Having a companion means being able to take on twice as many zombies at once. Having a decoy like a boombox or firecrackers can allow you to deal with fewer zombies simultaneously. Having a better melee weapon allows for faster kills. Mainly it's vehicles though. Vehicles have the ability to mow down zombies by the dozen, and are very overpowered. You'll no doubt end up resorting to the cheese tactic of opening a door, running away from the horde that emerges, jumping in a waiting car and running them all over in one go. It's simply a game design flaw, It's not meant to be played this way, but players will inevitably take the path of least resistance. If you can just run them all over in a few seconds, why bother to bash them on the head for minutes on end? That age-old problem of the third-person camera, largely solved by more polished developers like in Super Mario Odyssey and the modern Tomb Raider, still rears its ugly head here. Too often the camera will go behind a bush or clip into a tree or other scenery, leaving you oblivious to the impending brain-eating doom surrounding you. Given that many locations involve clearing a tiny house of a zombie infestation, which means traversing narrow hallways and tight doorways, you often feel like the camera's working against you, having made a behind-the-scenes deal with the zombies to get you killed. The field of view on the camera is also extremely narrow, cannot be customized, even on the PC. I can somewhat understand on the consoles, tight FOV means less to render, and they're already restricted in the visuals department, but on the PC, come on. Let us choose a setting we like. Lack of first-person view also hurts the game, such a bad third-person camera. Although you can't see what's behind you with a first-person camera, when the third-person camera is this bad, you often can't see what's in front of you or behind you, so just give us the option to switch. Now, the AI in State of Decay 2 is literally unchanged from the first game, and it's woeful. Companions often can't figure out how to run down stairs, so they jump instead, injuring themselves, or simply fall off a cliff because that's the best fast finding I can do, sorry. The voice lines make absolutely no sense in most situations, like a companion warning you that a plague zombie exists several seconds after you've already run it over. While you're in a vehicle, the AI will attempt to open the door to smash zombies as you drive past them, which is a good idea in theory. It's potentially useful, but it's ruined by ridiculously bad timing, with the door popping open way after the zombies already disappeared into the distance, in the majority of cases. Usually, AI companions will move out of the way if you try to occupy the same space as them. However, for reasons I couldn't figure out, sometimes they just don't. And their favourite activity is standing in the only exit doorway available. You end up playing a ludicrous game of cat and mouse as you try to just encourage your companion to move out of the doorway for long enough for you to get through. Even sillier still, if you have a companion riding in the rear seat of a car, and you get out of that car and then you run backwards, the companion will happily open the door in your face, knocking you to the ground. I've had one companion who died shortly after shouting a warning about a cloud of noxious gas. She then promptly ran straight into the gas, began choking, and was attacked and killed by the nearest zombie. I mean, that's when it hurts the most. When you take a companion out with you, knowing you've leveled that companion up by playing directly as that character many times, only to have the AI get it killed through a crazy action you could not possibly have avoided. It's one of the times that State of Decay 2 feels at its most broken and unfair. The day and night cycle's fully represented in State of Decay 2, and the nights are extremely dark. Sensibly, the area immediately around your character is always somewhat lit, but the visibility soon drops off rapidly and you literally can't see very far ahead at all. This does add to the stress of playing at night, and it's a time when I was more content to work on base upgrades and inventory management rather than the risky business of midnight scavenging. Each character does have an unlimited flashlight, and cars have headlights, but they're comically underpowered. They're still better than nothing, but they're going to attract more zombie attention, so it's another calculated risk on your part. One needless element of realism is the darkness inside your base. When it's dark outside and there's a zombie apocalypse going on, apparently zombies have a fondness for devouring light bulbs, and it becomes a huge pain trying to navigate the needlessly elaborate base layouts in absolute darkness. I understand what Undead Labs are aiming for. It's realistic that you wouldn't turn on the lights because you would attract zombies. In this case, though, I'm happy to suspend my disbelief and have some light inside my base, so I can stop tripping over the piles of discarded wood and paint cans and actually find what I'm looking for. So, here's my thing with State of Decay 2. Yes, it's horribly broken and buggy, but every single bug and game design decision mentioned above can be rectified, and hopefully at the very least many bugs will be. At its heart, there's an addictive and player-driven gameplay loop. There are generic high-level goals, such as finding a way to escape the zombie outbreak, but nearly all of the time you're deciding what you and your survivors will do next because you're short on supplies, or someone's asked you for help, or you could trade for something better than what you already have. it's compelling because you're invested in these characters. You can decide who you recruit, and it takes some work. Strangers will begin to trust you if you help them with supplies or safety, and eventually they'll be willing to join you. It's up to you to decide whether you could use another character who might or might not have some specialist skill that you already lack, but it will cost more in terms of bed space and daily food supplies. If you take on that extra survivor, it's now up to you to figure out whether to work on upgrading your garden to grow more food or just rely on scavenging it from some potentially dangerous source. I won't say every death is fair. There are too many bugs that cause your characters to die for reasons beyond your control. But there will be times when you take a calculated risk. You know that you probably need the extra food right now, or you risk losing some people. They might not leave, even without the food. Do you risk it, knowing scavenging food is too dangerous right now because you're low on bandages? Or do you go for the nearest food stash and to hell with the zombie infestation icon looming nearby on the map? If you were to start listening to this video without looking at the screen or looking at the title, you could easily be forgiven for thinking this was a State of Decay review instead of State of Decay 2. It would pretty much all be entirely accurate, save for some minor details about the darkness at night. There's so little change from the original game here that it just seems like a cynical cash-in from Microsoft and Undead Labs. It's been 5 years. How can it take 5 years to make a virtually identical game with a new game engine? Why can't we have more mechanics behind character leveling, or more elaborate options for building and decorating bases, or more types of supplies or loot to find, or custom clothing, or more types of zombies, or more vehicle repair options than just magically fix a vehicle by using a toolkit, or more combat options beyond mash the attack button and one single special move? There are so many possibilities in this genre that have not been explored, and I find myself mystified on two fronts. One, that nobody else has tried to do something in a similar style in the past 5 years, and two, that Undead Labs have not elaborated at all on the core formula in 5 years. So should you get this game? Well, right now it sort of depends. Suppose you're looking at the full price purchase. Definitely not. If you've already played State of Decay and you're flush with cash, can I have some? Then maybe you want more of exactly the same. If you haven't played either game before, the first State of Decay is available in the Year 1 edition, much cheaper, and it's virtually identical. The original games had time to mature as well, with all the DLC now included, and many of the more serious bugs fixed for good. However, the Play Anywhere and Game Pass systems throw a spanner in a zombie works. For $10, you can buy 1 month of Xbox Game Pass membership, which will get you State of Decay 2 in full, and you can simply cancel it after 1 month, by which time you'll probably have completed it. If you still really want the latest version, not the previous title, it's still worth waiting to see how many bug fixes arrive. It's also worth experiencing one of these games as bug-free as possible. It's highly unlikely I'd recommend you pick them up both at the same time, just because they're so unforgivably similar. And the other deciding factor might be the inclusion of online co-op in State of Decay 2. It is severely limited, and it is incredibly buggy for most players. I have seen varied reports. A lot of people are saying it works absolutely fine for me. What are you complaining about? And a lot of other people have demonstrably shown connectivity issues, people jumping around, vehicles flying up in the air for no reason. It clearly is an issue, but it only affects some people, and nobody seems to know why. So, just because it's not happening for some people, doesn't mean there aren't other people who are seriously affected. So that's your warning. I mean, it might be your thing to do the co-op though, in which case State of Decay 2 really is the only option out of the two titles. Dear Undead Labs, this is a genre that has so much promise, and you're squandering it. You have Microsoft and Unreal Engine on your side. Please don't fall into the trap of releasing buggy, unpolished games, and please elaborate on the formula before someone else does. I'm glad I was able to experience your fascinatingly compelling core gameplay for a mere $10, thanks to Xbox Game Pass, but it's not helping you very much to miss out on the full retail price in your pocket. Maybe if you can extend the gameplay mechanics and fix some of the atrocious bugs, more players might feel inclined to purchase the game in full. and gives you a chance at the next title in the series.